On our list, we have Mayor Nutter and Dr. Height. And if both the mayor and Dr. Height could come up at this time and make a brief presentation and respond to any questions that the members might have. Councilwoman Bass, good to see you. More than welcome to join us up here if you'd like, all right? Same with you, Councilwoman Blackwell. Thank you.
Good morning.
Just over here. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You can proceed.
Chairman Hughes, good morning. To all the members of this esteemed committee, thank you for being here in Philadelphia. Senator Hughes, as chair of the Democratic Appropriations Committee, thank you for this convening. Senator Kitchen, the leader of the Philadelphia Senate delegation, to all the members of the Senate who are here, certainly all friends to Philadelphia, and the Senator has recognized everyone with that protocol being established. I will not go back through the list. I will echo, though, the comments of Senator Hughes, thanking the two members of the Senate who do not directly represent Philadelphia. We greatly appreciate your interest in our city and, more importantly, in the children here in Philadelphia. To the members of City Council who are here, members of the State House of Representatives, again, we thank you as well and welcome to the city. Senator and members of the committee, I deeply appreciate this opportunity to testify on this critical issue facing all of us in Philadelphia, in southeastern Pennsylvania, and I would suggest the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. You'll hear from Dr. Height in a second, but I'm honored to sit next to Dr. Height under these circumstances, and I want to recognize him as a champion for children in our city, in the Commonwealth, and in the United States of America. Let me start by stating a very simple truth. Without enactment of the cigarette tax, the School District of Philadelphia does not and will not have the necessary revenues to open our schools on time, safely, and for an entire school year. That is unacceptable. It would mean that Philadelphia children would not have their right to a quality education delivered to them, not because of anything that they have done, but because of the actions, or in this particular instance, inactions of adults. Let me also be clear that this catastrophe will not only impact the children in our school district, it will also affect our charter-operated schools as well. We are in this place today not because of a lack of aggressive action by the school district, the leadership, the SRC, the governing body, or their staff. These are the facts. The school district has undertaken monumental actions in an attempt to compensate for cuts from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania's funding for public education in the city of Philadelphia, and dealing with rapidly increasing costs in areas like pensions and other costs of the largest school district in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. The district has cut over 5,000 positions. It has closed 32 schools and slashed its administrative costs by over 50%. I can point to no other, and I do not believe any other example exists of a public institution in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania that can equal this level of sacrifice. The district has had no choice. It had to take those steps to avoid running out of money, but those cuts have meant that students have not received the level of education to which they are entitled as Pennsylvanians. The district simply did not have the resources to provide the type of education that our students in Philadelphia deserve. Without the cigarette tax, the school district will not even be able to provide the current inadequate level of services that we provided in the last school year. Some of you are aware that during the course of the year, and many of you do as well, we visit any number of different schools. And toward the tail end of the school year, I had the opportunity to go to a number of different schools, to talk with students, to talk with teachers, principals, administrators, parents, and people in the community. Let me give you one very quick but telling example of what's going on in our schools in real time. I visited Bartram High School out in Southwest Philadelphia. It's a school of 1,100 students. They have one nurse. 4 years ago, Bartram High School had 166 adult personnel in that school. At the tail end of this school year that just completed in June, they had 97. It's a 40% reduction in staff. Adults who used to be in schools providing support services to our students. 3 to 4 years ago, they had 4 counselors, one for each grade, 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th. Today, they have 2. That story can be replicated in numerous schools across the Commonwealth, across the city of Philadelphia, day after day after day. Again, this potential catastrophe is also not due to the failure of Philadelphia's residents to support their schools. Since 2011, Philadelphia taxpayers have increased their support of the Philadelphia School District and our students by more than $325 million recurring annually. To put that funding increase in context, that $325 million is more than the amount that the city has budgeted this fiscal year for the Fire Department, Parks and Recreation, and the Free Library of Philadelphia combined. $325 million more in funding over the last 3 years, recurring annually, going to our schools. We have raised taxes on our citizens time after time, raised fees, raised parking rates. We've raised everything we possibly can, and still trying to do more for our students. Despite all that effort by the school district and Philadelphia's taxpayers, the school year is still in peril. We do not know today, sitting here in these great council chambers, whether or not schools will open safely and on time as we sit here in this hearing. The district faces a recurring structural gap between its revenues and its expenditures, in large part because the revenues it receives from the state have been slashed and economic stimulus money expired at the same time that costs in areas like pensions, health care, and debt service have risen rapidly. And in spite of the constant state of crisis, the Philadelphia School District, and more importantly, our students, have increased their graduation rates by 11% in the last 7 years. They've sought to generate opportunities to innovate, even with the completely inadequate funding that they've been receiving. The district will be opening 3 schools in North Philadelphia to deliver a highly personalized, proficiency-based education similar to many popular magnet and lottery-based charter schools, but targeted to students in the surrounding neighborhoods. And through the school redesign initiative, the district has invited local stakeholders, including educators, parents, community groups, and universities, to propose innovative, transformative ideas to fundamentally redesign our existing schools. We must also recognize the efforts of committed parents, students, teachers, and advocates throughout the city who have stepped into the breach to alleviate some of the effects of the crisis with their own talents, resources, time, and commitment. As positive as these things may be, they simply cannot make up for the fundamental resource gap from which our school system suffers. The legislature can take action that will ensure that Philadelphia school children can attend school safely as scheduled on September 8th and for a full school year. They return to Harrisburg and enact the cigarette tax as quickly as possible. The cigarette tax would in fact generate $83 million in its first year. That means that every month the tax would generate about $7 million, and that any delay in implementation means millions of dollars in support for our students that they will never receive. Merely advancing funds to the district that they are already scheduled and budgeted to get for the current fiscal year does not compensate for that loss. The district needs new revenue to close the $81 million budget gap. Merely getting money earlier in the year does nothing to close that gap. You've probably also heard people question the $83 million estimate for the cigarette tax. And while no one can guarantee how much revenue a new tax will generate, let me assure you, the Philadelphia Health Department based its estimates on reviewing literally decades of research on the impact of increases in the cost of cigarettes, including the impact of cigarette taxes in New York City and Chicago. Yes, the tax will result in a reduction of a number of people who smoke. It's actually a positive outcome. And yes, some people may initially buy their cigarettes elsewhere to avoid the tax. The Health Department already built into its projections those factors. Those arguments about how much the tax will generate are literally just a distraction. And no matter what it actually generates, and no matter what actually happens, we know that the tax will generate desperately needed revenue that is critically important to maintain the level of service that we're trying to provide, as inadequate as it may be. Delay equates directly to further painful losses for our students. It's just that simple. The legislature needs to take action, and needs to take that action as quickly as possible. The task is not difficult, but it is vital. Each house must come back for 1 day, 1 hour, and take one vote to finally pass the enabling legislation that both houses have actually already voted in favor of. We need them to go back to work so our children can go back to school. The actions the legislature will take now will impact the education of 200,000 students here in Philadelphia, now and in the future. That concludes my testimony, and at the appropriate time, I'd certainly be glad to take any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to go to Dr. Height. At some point, if you can provide us copies of your testimony, we can
Sure.
distribute it and place it in the record. Good morning, Dr. Height.
Good morning, Senator Hughes.
The microphone is yours.
Thank you. Good morning, Senator Hughes, again, and thank you for convening this opportunity. And to all of the other senators, thank you for being here, all of the delegates who are here today, all of the city council members who are here, the mayor. Thank you for shining attention or bringing attention to this very important and critical issue and the urgency surrounding this issue. Earlier this morning, I was with the governor who did a press statement, and that press statement was about an advancement of dollars that we've budgeted for already. It was for certification of the $120 million. Also that we've budgeted already, and it was the urging of the legislators in Harrisburg to come back and take up the cigarette tax issue. And as I indicated at that meeting, that doesn't change the fact that we still have an $81 million shortfall based on the revenue we need in order to meet the expenses. And I want to also add that that $81 million gets us to where we were a year ago. And no one would argue that that was sufficient or adequate to provide the resources that our children need and deserve in our schools. And so I did join with the governor to urge individuals to come back to take up this matter as quickly as possible. And so I wanted to add that bit of context before I begin my prepared remarks. And so last week's news regarding the cancellation of the Pennsylvania House of Representatives vote on the cigarette tax legislation was devastating. And it was devastating because here is a time, and it's typically a time, we all remember summers before we would begin school. And it is a time of year where individuals begin to get excited. And unlike when I was a child, you begin to see commercials, you hear commercials about school supplies, and there is an excitement that begins to build about that first day of school. Unfortunately, our first day of school is in peril. And when and how we start are based on many things that still must happen prior to making those decisions. And so, as I noted in messages to school district employees, the delay has potentially disastrous consequences for students, their families, and employees. As the days go by, so do our assurances to Philadelphia students and families that schools will open not only on time, but in a safe and responsible manner. I'm at a loss to explain how or why our students are caught once again in a political tug of war. I am an educator, and I can say unequivocally, however, that our students deserve more. Our students deserve better. To provide our students with the education they deserve, the School District of Philadelphia needs recurring and sustainable funds. And we need predictability. And we cannot start with one figure and hire people based on that figure and then carry those people until the money runs out. Because then that also creates a significant disruption for many children and their families. The cigarette tax is expected to generate crucial funds for the district and substantially close a portion of our current $81 million budget deficit. At full implementation, however, the tax is expected to deliver more than $80 million annually. In its first year, depending on how quickly it can be rolled out, the tax will generate approximately $40 million to $50 million. As you can see, the delay costs our students and schools real money. The frequent changes in the funding outlook this summer is causing significant harm to the children and families we serve. In my opinion, it is eroding public confidence in public education and hindering the city's economic prospects. Philadelphians deserve more. Philadelphians deserve better. Our children deserve more. Our children deserve better. As a city and commonwealth, we must create a path forward and commit ourselves to seeing it through. Our revenue challenges inhibit our ability to take to scale innovative, evidence-based models that will improve educational options. Our children cannot wait, nor should they have to. Finally, I want to employ our legislators once again, as did the mayor and as have all of you, to return to Harrisburg and consider the bill before August 15th. On behalf of the 200,000 students in Philadelphia public schools, both district and charter, and their families, I thank you for the opportunity to speak before you today. We are committed to doing what is best for students from the moment the bell rings on the first day of school. We hope that you will all do the same. Thank you, Mr. Senator. That concludes my testimony this morning.
Thank you very much, Dr. Haidt. I'm going to ask a question and open it up to the members here, and then we'll bring our second panel up right afterwards. I want to get to this issue. I think, Mr. Mayor, you referred to it, and Dr. Haidt, you talked about it, of a barely adequate environment that exists this past school year.
Yes.
And what it really means should we have to return to that reality by not getting these extra dollars. If you could speak more directly to that and more specifically. And Senator, you also, Dr. Haidt.
Sure.
And Dr. Haidt is going to be the expert on this, but Senator, again, I want to try to be even more clear. From my perspective, from a resource standpoint, not related to anything that teachers did in classrooms, not related to anything that principals did. They did what they could do with what they had. But from a system standpoint, from a pure funding standpoint, from an educational resource standpoint, last year was a disgrace for the students of the School District of Philadelphia. They are resilient, they are strong, they are focused, they understand at a certain level that they don't have the same things that many other folks have, and yet they strive forward. They come to school. They're trying to learn. They're graduating and going on, for many of them, to some of the best post-secondary educational institutions in the United States of America, notwithstanding the inadequacy. So that was last year. Yeah. Without the $81 million, that's just a disaster. And again, that raises the serious question of whether or not Dr. Haidt and his team feel that they can even open schools without the cigarette tax, because you're either going to, and he'll go into more detail, sure, I mean, you're either going to have massive a new round of layoffs on top of the 5,000 personnel that we don't have today. Class size exploding to 41, virtually no adults in a building, which then creates a dangerous environment for children. Or you don't open on time, which has its own obvious consequences, waiting forever, seemingly, until some action takes place. So last year was inadequate. Next year, without these dollars, would be a disaster. Next year, with the dollars, is the maintenance of inadequacy.
Right.
So this is about, at the moment, we are collectively, pathetically, having a conversation about just trying to maintain inadequate, to fill a hole. Not one new person, not one new service, not one new program, not one new class, nothing new. Same old thing from last year, which was horrible. That's what we're talking about. Folks don't seem to understand that. And the inability to understand the difference between cash flow and deficit is frightening for people who are supposed to actually be in charge of the 5th or 6th largest state in the United States of America, one of only 3 that does not have a student-weighted funding formula. There are at least 47 other examples out there of how to do that. And so this is a circumstance where we find ourselves. It is insane that we are having to have this conversation at this moment. In this chamber, a year ago, the Philadelphia City Council passed a cigarette tax 16-0. It's a local government issue. It's a local tax issue. On this one, we have not asked the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania for one dime. Yet we are a year later in the vortex of legislative and political hell, going back and forth about whether or not the local citizens here should be able to fund their own schools with their own tax dollars, merely seeking authorization to educate our students at some decent level, just like the other 499 other school districts in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. That's all we're asking for.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Dr. Hyatt?
Thank you. I was going to say is what the mayor said. Yeah. Hey, so so I think one thing that's really important, and I mean, and the mayor alluded to this, is that we got through last year because of the commitment of educators and principals and the students themselves, who are incredibly resilient, and students who still have hopes and dreams that we want them to achieve when they leave our school district. But to your question, Senator Hughes, so the $81 million gets us back to a place that no one would argue is sufficient or adequate. We've asked for an additional $224 million above the 81 in order to begin creating investments that allow us to return critical and significant services back to schools. Services back to schools that, if our children were living in a different jurisdiction, they would take for granted. Our children are not in a bubble. They have friends in neighboring school districts. They have friends and relatives in other states. They all attend public schools. They know what resources should be there, and they know what's missing from their schools. And so to ask them again to go below that is not something that I'm willing to do, first and foremost. But in addition, it speaks to why this point is so critically important, to allow us the resources in order to do what we feel like we know works. And we've shown some progress even with all of the revenue challenges that we've had. And just think what we could accomplish if we could do more, and if we had more. And so that's where we are at this moment. And it is, it's a hard thought for me to think that we would be reducing from the place where we started this year for next year. I mean, and when we got through this year on just the hard work and tenacity of staff members, parents, of children, and I think that to ask individuals to do that year after year while we continue to take away resources, I just don't think that is what our children deserve, and it's definitely not what our families deserve or the city.
Senator Kitchen.
Okay. Good morning, Mayor Street. Good morning, Dr. Height. I'm sorry.
It's okay. I'm good. I'll just put that on your tab, Senator.
I think I'll leave. Okay. May I be excused?
No. Senator, I'll just put that on your tab. That's all.
My dear friend
yes.
and colleague, and you know I love you.
And I love you too.
Dr. Height, we're hearing some of the same criticisms which are totally unfair, especially in light of the work that you have done. We're hearing some of the same criticism that we're at fault, and it is totally unfair. And would you like to address some of the accountability issues that you have put in place and some of the work that you have been doing? I don't think there's any other school district in the entire state that have done what you have done. And I must commend you on that publicly, and everybody needs to know it. So when we hear it, we know how to address it. So can you, talk about that a bit?
Yeah, I'll be glad to, Senator Kitchen. And I want to talk about some of those accountability frameworks and some things that we put in place. I want to talk about that in a moment, but I want to address the first part of your question first, because I think that's really important. Because I've also heard this, and I've heard this in and around the Commonwealth, because I've been talking with other legislators and with other superintendents, quite frankly. Every time I hear that, then I do ask the question about, does the person have the ability to show me another municipality in the Commonwealth or in any of the cities within the Commonwealth or any of the districts that have reduced by 5,000 the number of employees, has closed the number of facilities that we have closed, has reduced administrative spending to below 3%, has 2 concessionary labor contracts, but yet we're still facing an $81 million budget or revenue shortfall. And so if people can show me another jurisdiction or another department that's done that, then we can have this conversation about what we haven't done that is efficient and effective. Now, to your second point, we've also now put in new we have a new open data process where all of our information is public, including the salaries of our employees and the names of our employees. All of that is public information. We're putting budget information not just for the district, but for every school, and making that public so that anyone who is interested in looking at that information. We're looking at progress, growth, climate, and satisfaction as an accountability model that we're not only applying to district schools, but also to charter schools, and we're able to compare peers. So if you have similar demographics, we're going to compare you, not to everybody, but just to other individuals in your demographics. We have new evaluation structures, and we have a new process that we released just 2 weeks ago that allows communities to then give us their best thinking and ideas about how we can improve the schools in their neighborhoods, in a process that allows us to use the talents that exist inside of the city to address these issues. And I can go on and on and on, but the first point is not many other jurisdictions have done what we've done in order to control spending. And then in addition to that, even though we've been controlling spending, now we're also beginning to put and build those mechanisms that will allow us to operate more efficiently and effectively.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Mayor Nutter, just how many times, if you can let everyone know publicly, how many times that you've been to Harrisburg, working with us, the governor, our colleagues on the other side of the aisle, to anybody that would listen about the funding for our school district. Can you just elaborate on that briefly?
Well, Senator Kitchen, first, I want to announce that I'm having a great day. And
You're not going to let me.
But did you drink?
I'm going to get you a nice gift.
Did you drink your water? Did you drink your water?
A lot of it, yes. Senator Kitchen, you have convened any number of meetings of the Philadelphia Senate delegation during the course of this year, previous years. I have to be honest with you, at this point I've kind of lost track of how many times I've been to Harrisburg just for the current calendar year 14. I could throw out some numbers. I think it's in the teens now. I will share with you that I did get a notice from the Pennsylvania Department of Revenue asking for Harrisburg tax because I've been there so much they actually think I live in Harrisburg. But in a more serious way, there have been numerous trips to meet with, of course, yourselves as the Philadelphia Senate delegation. I've met with leadership of the Democratic caucus. I've met with leadership of the Republican caucus on the Senate side, the Republican leaders in the House, Democratic leaders in the House, and folks all across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Certainly our nearby southeastern Pennsylvania House and Senate, Democrat and Republican members, but I've met with the folks from Allegheny County. I've met with folks from Erie. I mean, I will meet with anyone, anytime, anywhere about schools and about funding the education of our children. So it's, for this calendar year, it could easily be 15, 18, possibly 20 some odd times between January and where we are today. And I talk to folks on the phone, and we get involved. There have been so many issues. I mean, we tried to stay in a very narrow lane about education funding. Both the Senate, Senator Williams, and the House, Representative Chairwoman Parker for the Philly House delegation, both introduced complementary legislation that was solely focused on the cigarette tax for Philadelphia. In the legislative process and then the magic machine that happens sometimes, our legislation ended up somewhere else, okay, and it was going down a path. It's actually been passed twice by the Senate and once by the House. So, I mean, we are caught in something that at a certain level has nothing to do with us. Yet our children suffer. It is just not fair. And adults don't put children at risk. Adults don't use children as human shields for their own political purposes. That is not right. It's just not right. So, and I've been there and I'll continue to go there. And again, your leadership for our Philadelphia delegation has been key. With regard to other legislators, we always get asked in both chambers, what's the Philadelphia delegation doing? Philadelphia delegation in the Senate and in the House, stellar in this regard, focused, determined, not taking any old thing for any old thing. I mean, we're appreciative of that, and we'll continue that advocacy. The best title I'm ever going to have. I've been fortunate to be in this body for 14 and a half years. I've been fortunate to be mayor of my hometown for 6.5 years. So the best title I'm ever going to have, and the one I'll have for the rest of my life, is father. I'm a dad. I care about children. I care about my own. I care about the other 200,000, no matter what school system they go to, no matter what individual school they go to. District managed, charter managed, that's not my role. That's not my business. Parents will decide where their children go. My job is to make sure that we have as many high-quality options for our children and for their parents to send their kids to a good school, get a great education, go on to be a wonderful Philadelphian, buy a house, pay your taxes, have a job, and go on with your life. That's my job, and that's why I'm up and down that turnpike to see all of you so many, many times, and I'm going to keep doing that because that's what I believe in.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Kitchen. Senator Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Mayor, and Dr. Height for being here today.
Sure.
A couple questions. One, and this is directed to Dr. Height. The mayor reflected in his opening comments that Philadelphia approximately raised, I believe, $340-some million.
$325 million now additional annually going to Philadelphia schools in the last 3 years. So that's an annual figure now of an additional $325 million, raising property taxes, raising use and occupancy tax, raising parking fees, now the extension of the sales tax, and additional just growth in some of those sources. $325 million. And Philadelphia City Council took very tough votes in many of those instances to provide those dollars. So I didn't do that by myself. It happened because it happened here first.
Yeah.
The question is, of that amount of money, does it include the $45 million grant that the...
No.
Okay.
No.
So
that
on
was
top
one
of
time.
it, okay. So the question is, there was a press event today. Did the governor mention the relief of the maintenance of effort on the $45 million one-time grant?
He did not, no.
So what we need to remember as a part of this record, over 2 years ago, the mayor arrived in my office and a series of other offices. There were a package of bills that were asked to provide funding to remove just the $81 million, but to get to the number that was proposed by Dr. Height when he first arrived. That include the 1% sales tax, that include the cigarette tax, that included funding formula changes, that included the cigarette tax. We have gotten the 1% done. We have gotten, frankly, out of the Senate more than one time the cigarette tax. We have also asked for the $45 million. What people need to understand today is if we do not, and on the fanfare when people arrive here, remember that that $45 million will transfer from the state to the county. That will be $45 million on top of the $320 million that the mayor alluded to today, which we do not have.
Right.
And taxpayers do not have here also. So I would hope that we would be asking, when we return, not only for the cigarette tax, but for the relief of the maintenance of effort for the $45 million. And I would also ask for some additional data. I think that we are probably the only school district, not just in Pennsylvania, probably one of the few in this country that have kept the doors open, sustained their ability to maintain whatever they're maintaining. But the effort regarding tax paying with this population, with taxpayers, is extraordinary.
Right.
And I think that the legislative body needs to have the data. So all the misinformation that flies around the Capitol can be countered with the facts.
Right.
Philadelphia has not only done what it can, it's done what others have not done.
Right.
And it is now in a place of not just simply the rage, frustration, and angst of the mayor and the rest of us who are housed here. It is the embarrassment and bane of the nation. This is the 8th largest school district in the country.
Right.
Those of us who can argue about how the school district performs, what options should be available, all know it costs money.
Right.
That's the bottom line. And this is not enough.
Right.
And so my question led to the most obvious, and that's the statement that reflects upon, let us get us prepared for when we return, whenever that is, with the set of facts that sets the record straight, refuting Republican, Democrat, when we get back, who's in charge, doesn't matter. This is the bottom line. And I want to conclude by thanking the chairman and the chair of the delegation for organizing this activity. This is not just about making sure that the world knows. This is about setting the record straight, providing a context, and giving an understanding about how we, frankly, in charge, a Republican-controlled legislature, have not taken this issue. These kids are not Democrats. They're Pennsylvanians.
Right.
And they deserve what every other Pennsylvania child deserves. That's an opportunity to pursue their dreams. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator, with your permission, just one comment to Senator Williams' the last part of his statement. I also want to make it clear that Philadelphia's financial crisis, Philadelphia School District's financial crisis, again, which is structural in nature, again, one of only 3 states in the United States of America that does not use a student-weighted funding formula. We are not the only school district in Pennsylvania that has significant financial challenges. There are now upwards of 25 different school districts that have any number of financial challenges in front of them. 75% of the school districts in Pennsylvania have had to raise their local taxes to make up for shortfalls from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And those children are not Democrats or Republicans. I don't know what their parents' political affiliation is. They are children. They are students. They are Pennsylvanians. And it is absolutely true that the quality of your education and the resources for your education should not be a function of your zip code or county or school district or anything else. If we are serious about moving Pennsylvania forward, about job growth, about population, about economic vitality, then the best dollars that we will ever invest will be in education. We should be looking at universal pre-K. We should be making sure that every child can read at grade level by 3rd grade. We should be making sure that that child is then getting adequate resources in whatever anybody calls middle school, because if you're not, that's a child that's going to drop out in high school. This is not rocket science. It's not even regular science. It's common sense. You don't have to be Warren Buffett to figure out that this is a great investment in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Jimmy Buffett could figure that out. This is about what we do as adults, helping children and helping ourselves. This is insanity, what we are facing here. The nation is watching what's happening in Philadelphia and in Pennsylvania. And if you are a business person looking at the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, when people come to see me now about the prospect of being in Philadelphia, the first thing they ask is actually not about taxes. The first thing they ask is actually not about incentives. And they want to know all that, and the CFO will get with the economic development people, and they'll have a wonderful conversation. Increasingly, people are asking me, what's going on with schools? What's happening with education? How am I going to have the necessary workforce to expand and grow my business? That's what CEOs are asking in our city, in our region, and in our state. They're asking about education. Business people get it. The workforce is going to change over very quickly, very soon. They're looking at their next workforce. Those are 8th graders. Right now, they're trying to figure out, will they be ready 10, 12 years from now, 14 years from now, to work in my company? That's the conversation that's going on right now in this city and all across Pennsylvania. It is education. It has to be education. That should be a topic of discussion every day, everywhere, all the time, if we are serious about moving the city, this region, and the state forward. Thank you.
Let me just, gentlemen, hold for a second. Just want to do a little housekeeping stuff. Senator Washington's begged off her question. We'll go to... For the purpose of time.
I just want to say that for time concerns, basically we're all going to say the same thing. I certainly want to thank you, Mayor Good and Dr. Height, for, now you done took it back. Shirley and I got to stop sidebarring. We certainly know who you are. But
we've covered.
I just want to say, I know we're having a bad day. I certainly want to say there's a lot going on.
Will you help me?
Yes,
will you help me?
I have been.
Will you help me?
I have been. I certainly want to say there's a lot going on as it relates to education. Dr. Height,
I think we've covered it all now.
I heard someone ask you the question whether or not you were sorry that you came, and you said no. I see the fight in your spirit. I know that education, administration, and all the above is very important to you. Certainly we know our Mayor Nutter has come to Harrisburg many, many times, not only come to meet with our delegation, but to meet with us as individual senators to talk about education and what that means. I also heard someone say that, what is it about Philadelphia? We fight on every issue for Philadelphia and Harrisburg. And so education is very, very important, but it's not the only thing that we fight for. I think those of us who are here, who are members of the Philadelphia Senate delegation and WISE and council people and other people who are here, they know the House members, they know the fight and the struggle that we go through on a daily basis. Certainly after you come into Harrisburg and see what goes on up there, you certainly understand it as well. But I do want to say that we know that the Constitution says that our children are supposed to have an education. And we know that it's our responsibility to never give up on fighting for that. And so certainly we're prepared to go back. We passed it in the Senate twice already, and we're willing to do whatever it takes to get it done because we know it's very important. Mr. Mayor, you know initially I was not for any tax for anybody anymore because we tax our citizens enough. But when it comes to education, there's no question about what we do and how we make that decision. It's not about the citizen. It's about our children who want to become independent citizens one day and be voters and might be in the same situation. You know, things are getting very, very bad as it relates to money. But I do want to say it was very convenient for Governor Corbett to have that press conference before we met here for this hearing today. But the sad part about it is that he didn't fill the hole and he didn't bring new money, and we must challenge him on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Washington. Just for purposes of logistics, before I call on, I see Councilman Jones has a question. We have our second panel, and following this, if they would just prepare themselves, I have listed Christine Brisson, Pastor Alan Waller, David Hardy. I have on my list Steve Bradley from the African American Chamber of Commerce and Varsovia Fernandez from the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, if they could prepare themselves. I also want to acknowledge the presence of Representative Ron Waters and Representative Morton. Welcome to join us up here. But if those individuals could prepare themselves as we finish up our questioning here, Councilman Jones and then Senator Farnese, and then Senator Wozniak.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And again, I'll echo thanking you for having these important and timely hearings. I want to recognize the Chair of Education, Councilwoman Blackwell, and my colleague, Councilwoman Bass, who have had to sit through hours and hours and hours of education hearings at our level to come up with the contributions towards that education. And each year, thank them for stepping up to the plate and taking the hard tax votes, as Mayor Green talked about.
We just keep going down the line. Just keep going down the line.
But
if we could stop at Mayor Green.
We'll stop. We won't go any further. But what I'd like to echo is that we view you as strategic partners in Harrisburg and in the education of our kids. I want to, however, end into what I see in the 30 schools that are in my councilmanic district. And I've had the opportunity to walk through many of those hallways with you, Dr. Height. Yeah. And my alma mater, Overbrook High School, is about to experience its third principal in as many years because of the instability, the inability to predict where things are going. The fact that principals took a 5% pay cut voluntarily in order to make ends meet. I wanted to ask you, Dr. Height, are we experiencing trouble attracting personnel because of this type of instability by way of our funding?
Yeah, we are having some difficulty, particularly with the large turnover of principals. And it wasn't a 5% cut, it was a 10% cut that they agreed to change the financial trajectory of the system. We have, the unfortunate part of the question is because we've been going the other way. We've been reducing staff in most places other than principal. But it is it's the inability to predict where the district is going financially that creates a level of frustration for many principals when they're all being recruited by other school districts that have a bit more predictability and stability. And so it does present an additional challenge. We feel like we have done a great job in attracting the leaders that will begin this school year. And we want this school year to begin a process where there is stability for those individuals and predictability.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Majority Leader Jones. Senator Farnese, if you allow me to take the privilege of one of our traveling guest senators here, Senator Schwank. Judy from Berks County, would you proceed?
Thank you, Senator Hughes. Good morning, and thank you so much for being here. I want you to know I'm not here just to be a bookend at a table. that I really, really
Thank you.
care about Pennsylvania's children. The
Thank
last
you.
time I knew, Philadelphia was still in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you matter. Your
Thank you.
children matter.
Thank you.
Here's my question for you. We've seen these young people come in, they've been so polite, and they're sitting there holding their signs. One thing that we know, there's no do-over with this. You're only in third grade for 1 year. You're not going to be able to hold kids back.
Right.
So I think it's important for all of us to understand that every single one of these students who's getting an inadequate education this year is going to suffer that year, and that will continue to hold them back as they go
That's right.
through life, not just till they get to the 12th grade or college or whatever it may be. But one specific concern I have is the impacts of this deficit on special needs students and our gifted students. They are a big concern. Can you talk about that a little bit, Dr. Height?
Yeah, we'll be glad to talk about that. We're still focused on children with special needs, particularly those with IEPs. Gifted students, on the other hand, have seen a pretty significant reduction in resources, simply because if we're cutting what we allocate to schools, and many schools use that money to provide resources for gifted children, then in many cases that was one of the first things that was removed from their budgets. And so we're not providing those young people with the type of programming and resources that should be in their schools for children who are identified gifted. And so that is one of our challenges. And in addition to that, not just the children who are talented and gifted, but children who have demonstrated an ability to go beyond what we're asking them to do, things like advanced placement, things like language, in multiple languages in schools. All of those things have been impacted dramatically across many of our schools. These are all things that should be a part of what every school offers. And that's why we've talked about investments in what works. But it is not fair to any of our children, but in particular to that group of children that you talked about.
So, Senator, if I can add, in addition to what you asked about, when I was on the regular visits and listening tours, students also shared that when a teacher is lost to a school, it's not only the work that teacher may be doing in the classroom, but that particular teacher may have also been the leader of a club, an after-school program or activity. When that teacher goes, the club goes.
Right.
So many after-school programs, many club programs. I think when we were at GAMP, great music school here in Philadelphia, but they don't have art. And when I asked the students about that, they had to query amongst themselves to remember when they last had art. And they finally figured out, but just from a timing standpoint, that it was in 8th grade. Because they had to talk amongst themselves to figure out, well, that teacher, yes, that one left, and then the other one came, and numerous substitutes. I mean, there are students who can go a whole school year with a series of substitute teachers. Now, I'm not against substitute teachers, and they try to do their best. Students need stability. They need regularity. They need teachers and instructors who actually know them and work with them. So it's not only what happens in the classroom from, whatever your time is, 8:10 to 3:10 or 3:09 or 3:19 or whatever that is. There's a whole series of after-school activities that take place or don't take place because of the loss of personnel. That also impacts our folks. And before someone says, art, that's a nice thing to have, but it should be a standard part of the curriculum like English and math. I mean,
Right.
Art and music the science is clear again. It's been demonstrated to help students in a variety of ways learn what they need to know going forward. It's not just about whether you can draw or not. I mean, I can't draw at all, but art is important, and it's important to other development. So that's what this is about.
Essentially, what you're saying is a generation will be lost here, potential that we are not realizing and recognizing,
Yep.
as well as students who may not have the aids that they need in special needs classes.
Right.
It's disgraceful.
And then we
but
will
thank you.
wonder why they are where they are.
Senator, if I may. and to the Senator's last point, a week ago I submitted an opinion piece, and the opinion piece is that children should be a part of the Renaissance in Philadelphia. And if we think about that Renaissance in Philadelphia, and the mayor described this, if there are individuals or businesses that are looking to locate or relocate here, if there are businesses that exist here already, then number one, children don't have access to those opportunities if they can't read. And if they've not graduated from high school, the individuals in those businesses are impacted because that is a potential customer that may not be there, simply because there's a skills gap that exists. And so this is a part of, this is all a complete piece, because if we can provide children with early childhood opportunities, pre-K, if in fact we can get more children reading by the time they're 8 years old, then we get more children to graduation. And it's not, as the mayor indicated, this is not rocket science. It is what we know. And so part of why we are requesting additional resources, it's for those types of things. And those must be available regardless of income, zip code, whether or not a child is learning English, or whether or not a child has special needs, or whether or not they're talented and gifted or coming from circumstances of poverty. They should be available for every single child in the city.
Thank you, Senator Swank. I want to please acknowledge the presence of Senator Mike Stack. Mike, it's good to see you this morning.
Good morning.
We want to go to Senator Farnese, then Senator Wozniak, and then we're going to ask our next panel to come up. Senator Farnese.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just again to reiterate, thank the chairman for the hearings today. I want to also thank, of course, Senator Williams for his tireless advocacy on the cigarette tax. Of course, Senator Kitchen as well for ensuring that this issue consistently gets before not only our delegation, but working with the delegation across the aisle, or actually across the building in the House. And, reference has been made both by Dr. Haidt and the mayor about the legislature going back, the House going back into session. We want to make sure that, folks understand that this is not, we don't want to get politics involved here, but you look around this room, you see members of the Philadelphia delegation from the House are here today. Mm-hmm. They are ready, willing, and able to go back at a moment's notice to get this done. Right. We all know who is in charge of the House up there. This is Speaker Smith and Leader Terzai. It's their decision whether or not to bring these folks back to get this done. So we want to make sure that when we talk about the legislature that we point out that our folks are ready, willing, and able. They are ready to go back at a moment's notice to get this done. They were ready to do it back in June, and they're certainly ready to do it now.
Senator, thank you for saying that. And I am quite well aware that when the previous announcement was made, that is why, as Dr. Haidt indicated, the announcement last week was so devastating, given the fact that the House Republican leadership, Speaker and the Majority Leader, had announced weeks ago that the House was coming back in session this week. 4th, 5th, and 6th are the dates that I was given, and we did receive indications, very strong indications, that if the House did in fact come back in the session this week, that the Senate was more than ready to come back as well. And so it could not be more crystal clear what the issue is and what the problem is. The problem is that the current legislation is sitting in the House, needs action taken. The House needs to come back. 1 hour, 1 day, 1 vote. And the Speaker and the Majority Leader are the folks who can make that decision and make these issues happen. And I have certainly the fullest confidence from your statement, the leader of the Philadelphia delegation, the leader in the Democratic caucus, and on the Republican side in the Senate, that the Senate would be fully responsive if the House were to come and do their job.
Absolutely. And again, Mr. Mayor, I think we all, and the fact that we're sitting here in the first week of August and kids are sitting here with signs, that just, they shouldn't be doing that. Kids should not be, first week of August, should not be sitting in City Hall in the middle of the summer, pleading pleading for dollars so that their schools can be open in a few weeks, and that really is just it's an embarrassment, and it's an embarrassment to the city of Philadelphia. It's an embarrassment to the legislature, and it's an embarrassment to this governor that this has gotten to this point. That we are here the first week of August, and we know from talking about this issue with the cigarette tax, we have been advocating for this again under the leadership of these folks here, Senator Williams, Senator Kitchen, and of course the minority leader in the Appropriations, Senator Hughes, year after year. I mean, we voted for this cigarette tax and appropriations last year.
Right.
I mean, I took a vote on this. This committee voted this bill out of appropriations where it sat all summer long, all throughout, and then to sit there and start this dance again in 2014 where, we're going to tie the cigarette tax to something else. Last year it was liquor privatization. This year it was some ridiculous bonehead pension program that we all knew would have blown up the state, but they had to tie it in that way. I mean, anything they can possibly do to delay this. And I just want to leave you and say this. You were going through your analysis of this, and you said, folks don't seem to understand this. They don't understand that we're not talking about new money. We're talking about money that will just get us to a status quo, an inadequate level from last year. Mr. Mayor and Dr. Hite, don't fool yourselves. These people understand it completely. They just don't give a damn. They just don't care, and that's the problem. They understand this. Like you said, Jimmy Buffett can understand this. This is not rocket science. They understand what's going on here. They just don't care. And I don't know how else to motivate these people. I don't know how else to motivate these people, but I will tell you that when I sit around this table and I see my colleagues like Senator Schwank and Senator Wozniak come here, because these folks sincerely care about Pennsylvania, and they care about the school children. They care about the school children of Philadelphia because they understand what everybody here understands, that this is the future of not only the Commonwealth but of the United States. We need to make sure that we give kids every possible opportunity to succeed. So I can't thank the two of you enough for what you have done, what you continue to do. And it's an embarrassment that we have to sit here in the first week of August, and children should be out. They should be at playgrounds. They should be, at pools, reading, doing whatever kids do, getting ready for the school year to start, and instead being here and holding up signs. And I see that sign in the corner, the pink slip sign. I mean, it is just horrible that the rest of the country has to see what this state is going through right now. And it is, unfortunately, this began when this administration took office, and each and every year we have seen public education in this state just erode a little bit more and a little bit more, to the point where we are literally fighting just to open the doors of the school district of Philadelphia in September. So I hope that we can get some positive action from this. And I want to just thank you, and I want to thank all the members of the House that are here, and city council members that took time out of their day to come here, because these folks have taken votes each and every year that we have given the enabling legislation for, and they are out there on the front lines as well. So thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let me ask. Let me ask. Let me ask Senator Wozniak.
There we go. Feel a little exposed out here.
Yeah.
Senator Schwank, you're wrong. Third grade was the best 3 years of my life. Not really. All I needed to know I learned in kindergarten. Mayor, Doctor, I wanted to come here today because I want to give perspective. I come from the mountains of Appalachia, as Senator Williams affectionately calls the mountain boys who hunt, get all dressed up and hunt animals and stuff with rifles. But we educate our children too. I'm very cognizant of it. We're all under financial constraints. Yeah. But I want to give some of the citizens a perspective. I have 5 counties. It takes 4 of my counties, every soul in it, to make up as many children as you have in your school district. So just the size and immensity of it is something that a lot of the rural legislators don't fully comprehend. And it's so easy to bash on Philadelphia. It's big. If they would just tighten their belt, a lot of that money gets wasted. And I'm glad that you brought out the issues that you brought out. I'm going to come back to them. But I think we suffer from myopia. You want to reduce crime. You want to reduce violence. You want to reduce drug dependency. You want to reduce social welfare rolls. Then you invest in the education of the most important product that we can produce, and that's our children.
Yes.
Right.
No tax is supposed to be easy. There's a reason the pressure is there not to raise taxes. But we live in a circumstance now, in an atmosphere, that everybody, for some reason, the word tax is absolutely evil. It's my understanding that what we're attempting to do is give authorization to council and a final signature by the mayor to allow Philadelphians to tax themselves.
Yes.
We may very well be facing that same conundrum next fiscal year unless there's some incredible turnaround in our economy. And I'm very concerned that that philosophy is going to run rampant in Harrisburg. But once again, I want to come back to, since taxes are not supposed to be easy, you have to justify them. So can you reiterate what you have done, one more time, to reduce your costs here in the Philadelphia School District?
Sure, I'd be glad to. We have closed 31 facilities. We have reduced the workforce by 5,000. We have reduced administrative spending to under 3%. And why is that significant? Most administrative spending in districts across this country are around 10%, in some cases as high as 20%. We also have 2 concessionary labor contracts, one with our administrators, the other one with our blue-collar union, where those individuals agreed to reductions and contributions to benefits. And so those are some of the things that we have done in order to control forced spending. And we also now have a new authorized quality initiative that then allows us to monitor charter schools more tightly and more directly, and so we also have taken that initiative up as well. And so those are the things that we've done in order to reduce cost on the expense side, and then in terms of efficiencies, we put in accountability metrics, we've made all of our data public, and now we have frameworks to give us some indication of where money is going, what it's being spent, the purpose of that spending. All of our contracts are also now available to the public as well.
Senator, so Dr. Haidt is taking you through the efficiency and the cost reduction side. And again, I would reiterate the additional revenue side from the city of Philadelphia. And again, we also work in a very cooperative fashion. The city is required, of course, under the PICA Act, to produce 5-year plans through a joint agreement with the school district, or the SRC and the school district and the Commonwealth. The school district now produces 5-year plans, so that we're not in an environment where it's kind of 1-year fixes, 1-year gimmicks. They're looking forward. A dollar spent is $5. A dollar saved is $5, and that kind of budgeting. Given some of the cuts that the district has faced and trying to provide some decent level of support for our school children, we have raised property taxes twice, 2 different times in the city of Philadelphia, increased the use and occupancy tax, got through with your kind support the extension of the sales tax, and of course now pending the cigarette tax. Not including the cigarette tax, that adds up to an additional $325 million of new spending, recurring dollars every year for the school district. So they've become more efficient, they've cut their costs, and the city of Philadelphia at the same time has increased its support. And we don't do that because we have a printing press in the basement. That comes as a result of bills that come in this city council, go through a process, voted by the members here, and we are asking the citizens of Philadelphia for additional resources out of their pockets to support a quality education for all of our school children. So we're doing both.
Right. More
efficient, saving money, and the city government putting forward more dollars.
I traveled a long way, Vince.
Go ahead, John.
So I understand organized labor would be the AFT and whoever the non-teacher.
That's correct.
Have acquiesced and gave concessions because they understand the pressure that the school district's under. So everybody came to the table and gave something up to stretch those dollars further.
Correct. We're still in negotiations with the PFT, which is the Philadelphia affiliate. We have not arrived at a place of agreement yet, but we are asking those individuals for some concessions as well.
I know that the basic education formula is all messed up. The last time it was fair was in 1968 when we reduced from 2,700 school districts down to 500, and had the basic education formula was rolled out at that point. That was the first and last time it was fair, because every time after that it got a little bit more discombobulated, and I've been at the table and trying to help out some of my school districts too, because things aren't working out. That baby needs to be thrown out with the bathwater and started all over again to make it fair for every student. This is information I'd like to have maybe later on. I don't want to prolong this, but your student-teacher ratio,
Sure.
your cost per student,
Yep.
and your non-teacher to teacher.
Yep.
Okay? All school districts are different. That 3% administrative cost is extremely low, and I want people to understand that. He's correct.
Yeah.
That's very, very good for something, for accomplishment. And I just want to, what percentage of your employment was that 5,000 that were furloughed or laid off or terminated? You said no other school did that. Well, I'd have to talk to kind of 5,000 students in my entire district, but that's as a percentage of the employees.
Yeah, it's a little more than 20% of the workforce.
Okay. And Mayor Nutter, and to the people here, I see him almost every week down in Harrisburg. The first time I met his SUV parked in my parking space, and I wasn't too happy about that. But I see his emissaries all the time, and they're over here, and when I see them in the hallways, I always go the other way because they're always asking for something. Yeah. But your mayor is an excellent individual. He's enthusiastic. His heart is in Philadelphia, and one thing I think you already know where the Senate's at.
Thank you.
You've got to go to work on the leaders of the Republican GOP. And there is that mindset, particularly the further you get away from Philadelphia. And one, they don't want to know about it. They don't want to pretend it exists. And nothing gets people reelected more than bashing on Philadelphia back home. And it's a shame and it's a sin. That's why I came the whole way from the mountains of Appalachia to come and support you.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator.
Let me just thank you, Senator Wozniak, and as the next panel comes forward, and I certainly understand, because we hear this all the time, folks outside the city don't care about the city, but they doggone sure come here to raise money out of the city of Philadelphia. They doggone sure want tickets to the games. They want tickets to the theater. They want their kids to get into children's hospital if they're sick. They want their kids to get into the university if they want access. You can't keep taking out of and not put something back in. You can't keep coming to the table raising money. And we're glad that members of the Chamber of Commerce have said that they're supportive of this issue, but you can't get both. You can't come here coming raising money and getting money out of the program without putting some money back into the program. All right, and we want to invest in other places, and they got to help out. This is not an endless, bottomless pit that exists here, and at the foundation of this is our children. We want to thank Mayor Nutter, Dr. Height, for your testimony today. We appreciate your efforts. Don't give up. Keep moving forward. And we'll get this thing done one way or the other. One way or the other, we're going to get this thing done. Thank you very much.
Senator Hughes, on behalf of Mayor Good, Mayor Street, and myself, thank you very much for this opportunity today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.